James Carter lived a quiet, almost invisible life in the heart of the small town of Willow Creek, Georgia, where winding red dirt roads snake through endless cotton fields. At 40, James was a white man with gray-blue eyes and brown hair already streaked with silver. He was tall and broad-shouldered, but always walked with his head down, as if trying to avoid the world's gaze. His old wooden house, perched on the edge of town, was the only inheritance his parents had left him. The faded wooden panels creaked whenever the autumn wind blew through, and the sagging porch seemed to whisper stories of hard days long gone. James was a carpenter, a trade he had learned from his father, who had once dreamed of opening a large woodworking shop, but never got the chance. Every day, he rose at dawn, brewed a strong cup of black coffee in a chipped kettle, and sat by the window looking over the deep green pine forest. His work was simple: making tables and chairs, fixing rooftops, or carving small toys for the town's children. Though he was highly skilled, James rarely charged much. "Let folks live first," he often said to Mr. Tom, the owner of the only lumber store in Willow Creek, whenever he was urged to raise his prices. His income was modest, but James never complained. He lived alone, no wife, no children, and seemed to need nothing more than peaceful days. But behind his rugged and quiet exterior, James carried a heart full of scars. His mother, Mary, had died of cancer when he was only 10, leaving a void that nothing could fill. His father, Henry, a construction worker, died in a work accident just 2 years later. James was raised by his grandmother, a strict but loving woman. She taught him that kindness was the only thing that never lost value, no matter how harsh the world became. "You don't have to be rich, James," she used to say, "but you must live in a way that brings you no shame." That teaching etched itself into his soul, becoming the compass for all his choices. Willow Creek was a small town where everyone knew each other's names and daily habits, but it was also a place where quiet prejudices lingered, like cold drafts slipping through door cracks. Even in the year 2025, racism still existed, subtly but undeniably. Black and white families appeared to coexist peacefully, but suspicious glances and hushed whispers still floated through conversations at cafes and Sunday church. With his white skin and deep Southern voice, James was no stranger to such undercurrents. He had witnessed his black friends being mistreated, and it always unsettled him. But he chose silence, not out of cowardice, but because he believed actions spoke louder than words. James's life passed with the steady rhythm of an old clock. Every morning, he drove his faded blue truck to the lumber shop, worked until late afternoon, and returned home with a loaf of bread and a few cans of beer. In the evenings, he sat in his armchair, reading his mother's old books, mostly Toni Morrison's novels and Langston Hughes's poetry. He loved how their words spoke of pain and hope, as if they understood what he could never say aloud. James had no close friends, didn't attend town gatherings, and rarely laughed out loud. The townspeople of Willow Creek called him the lonely carpenter, but they also respected him for his quiet kindness, like when he repaired Widow Wilson's roof for free, or built a wooden wheelchair for the disabled boy at the end of the street. One autumn morning, with crisp air and yellow leaves drifting gently on the path into the woods, James left his house earlier than usual. He carried an axe and a saw, planning to cut some pine wood to build bookshelves for the community library. The sun had yet to rise fully, and mist still clung to the base of the trees. Birds chirped overhead, their song mixing with the soft crunch of his footsteps on the damp earth. James cherished these moments, when it felt like the world consisted of only him and nature. But that day, an unfamiliar sound tore through the stillness. It was crying, faint, broken, but unmistakably a child's. James froze, listening. The sound came from deep in the forest toward a clearing few ever passed through. His heart began to race. He thought it might be an injured animal, but when the cry came again, he knew it wasn't. "Why would a child be out here?" he muttered, anxiety in his voice. Without hesitation, he dropped the axe and saw and ran toward the sound. Dry branches cracked beneath his boots, and his breathing grew heavy. Reaching a small clearing where sunlight filtered through the trees, James stopped in his tracks. Before him lay 5 newborn baby girls, swaddled in torn blankets on a filthy old sheet. Their skin was deep brown, glistening in the soft morning light, but their eyes, oh, their bright blue eyes, like the summer sky, held James in place. The babies were trembling. One barely had the strength to cry. No one else was around, just the wind and the rustling leaves. James knelt, his chest tightening. "Who would do this?" he whispered, voice shaking. He looked around, hoping to see a mother, a clue, but found nothing but terrifying silence. James took off his jacket and gently wrapped it around the babies without thinking. They were so small that all 5 fit snugly in his arms. The warmth of his body made one of them cry louder as if sensing safety. James stood up, holding them close to his chest, and hurried home. He didn't know what he would do next, whether he could even care for one child, let alone 5. But he knew one thing at that moment. He couldn't abandon them. Back at his wooden house, James laid the babies gently on the sofa, wrapping them in the cleanest blankets he could find. He called Dr. Helen, the only person in town he trusted. While waiting, he awkwardly warmed milk and boiled water and tried to keep the babies from getting cold. Looking into those bright blue eyes staring back at him, James felt a strange mixture of fear and warmth. "What am I going to do with you girls?" he whispered, though deep down, he already knew the answer. James Carter's journey, the story of the lonely carpenter, was no longer his alone. A new chapter filled with challenges and love had just begun. James Carter stood frozen among the pine trees of Willow Creek, his breath mingling with the early morning mist. In front of him, 5 newborn baby girls huddled together on a torn cloth, trembling in the autumn chill. Their deep brown skin shimmered under the faint sunlight filtering through the canopy, but what made James's heart nearly stop were their eyes. 5 pairs of brilliant blue eyes glowing like gems in the night sky. The baby's faint, broken cries blended into one desperate chorus that pierced the forest silence. James dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he reached for the damp cloth wrapped around one of the infants. "Dear God, what is this?" he murmured, his voice strained from shock and sorrow. He looked around, hoping to find a clue, a frantic mother, a car hastily driven away, or any trace that might explain why 5 infants had been abandoned in such a remote place. But there was nothing but the wind whistling through the pine branches and the crunch of dry leaves beneath his boots. A chill ran down James's spine. He wasn't a superstitious man, but something about this moment felt surreal, as if fate had placed him in the right place and time. He shook his head, trying to dispel the strange feeling, and focused on the tiny lives before him. One of the babies had stopped crying, her lips turning purple from the cold. James knew he couldn't waste another second. Without another thought, he removed his old flannel coat, the same one he had worn for over 10 years, and gently wrapped it around the babies. They were so small that all 5 fit snugly in his arms, like a precious bouquet. The warmth of his body made one of them squirm and cry louder, as if sensing safety. James held them close to his chest, feeling their weak heartbeats sinking with his own. He stepped quickly out of the forest, his boots caked in mud, his mind in chaos. "What am I going to do?" he wondered, but his feet didn't stop. Every step was an unspoken vow. He would not leave them alone. Back at the wooden house, James placed the babies on the sofa and wrapped them in the cleanest wool blankets from his cupboard. Once silent, the house was filled with the unfamiliar but vibrant sound of crying. James clumsily boiled water and mixed formula from an old can he had once bought for a cousin's child. He didn't know if it was suitable, but it was all he had. His hands shook as he held the bottle, letting drops fall into one baby's mouth. Her blue eyes stared up at him, unblinking, as if searching for an answer. James smiled, though his heart was a storm of emotions. "Shh, little one," he whispered, his voice unexpectedly gentle. He called Dr. Helen Carter. No relation, just a coincidence of surnames. The only person in Willow Creek he truly trusted. Helen was a black woman in her 50s, with silver curls and a smile that could soften worry. She had cared for generations in this town, from births to end-of-life visits. "James, what did you say? 5 newborns?" Helen nearly shouted over the phone. "I'm coming right away. Don't do anything stupid. Keep them warm." James nodded, though she couldn't see, and kept tending to the babies. He swapped the dirty clothes for clean towels, gently wiped their skin, and checked for injuries. Thankfully, aside from being cold and hungry, the babies appeared unharmed. When Helen arrived, she brought a medical bag and a look that was equal parts concern and curiosity. "James Carter, you sure know how to scare a person," she said, setting the bag down and immediately examining the babies. She checked temperatures and heartbeats and gave them a special rehydration solution. "They're weak but strangely healthy," Helen observed, frowning. "These blue eyes are scarce, especially with this skin tone. Where did you find them?" James told the story, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his confusion. Helen shook her head. "Someone abandoned them deliberately, James. This wasn't an accident. What are you planning to do?" Helen's question pierced James like a blade. He looked at the 5 baby girls, now calmer, nestled in their blankets. One of them clutched his finger, gripping tightly enough that he could feel the fierce life force in her tiny body. I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't abandon them. I won't hand them over to the system. I've seen what happens to orphans around here." James thought of the black boy he once met at a shelter. Those hollow eyes, vacant from being abandoned too long. He wouldn't let these girls suffer the same fate. Helen looked at him, her expression softening. "You know this won't be easy, right? A single white man raising 5 black baby girls in Willow Creek? People will talk, and you're not exactly wealthy." James nodded, lips pressed tightly. He understood exactly what she meant. This town, friendly on the surface, had no shortage of gossip. He could already imagine Mrs. Smith whispering in the grocery store, or Mr. Johnson at church giving him suspicious looks. But when he looked into the baby's blue eyes, James felt a strange kind of strength. "I'll figure it out," he said, more firmly than he thought. That night, James didn't sleep. He sat in his armchair, watching the babies sleep in a makeshift crib he had fashioned from an old wooden crate. Their steady breathing was the only sound in the house. He thought about his mother, who once told him stories about the kindness of strangers. "You were right, Mom," he whispered. But then, the questions returned. Who left these babies? Why? And more importantly, could he, a man who had never been a father, living on a few $100s a month, give them the life they deserved? James clenched his fists, caught between helplessness and resolve. The next morning, Helen returned with a social worker, Laura, a young white woman with a strained smile. "Mr. Carter, we need to take the babies to the medical center for further evaluation," she said, her voice professional but cold. James felt a sudden surge of anger. "They're fine. I took care of them all night," he replied, his voice sharper than intended. Laura glanced around the house, the stained walls, the creaky wooden floor, and jotted something in her notebook. "We'll also need to alert the police, These children may belong to someone. James nodded. But deep inside, he knew no one was coming for them. After Laura left, Helen took James's hand. "You want to keep them, don't you?" she asked. James didn't answer right away. He looked at the 5 baby girls, now clean and dressed in tiny clothes Helen had brought. One stirred, a faint smile curling her little lips in her sleep. "Yes," James said, his voice low but steady. "They're my daughters." Helen smiled, though her eyes were filled with concern. "Then get ready, James. This journey won't be easy." Morning sunlight streamed through the window of James Carter's wooden house in Willow Creek, Georgia, illuminating the dust particles suspended in the air. 5 newborn baby girls lay nestled in wool blankets on the old sofa, their steady breathing interspersed with tiny coos. Their jet-black skin contrasted sharply with their bright blue eyes, as if they carried a secret the world wasn't yet ready to understand within them. James stood nearby, holding a cup of coffee gone cold, his gaze fixed on the infants. He had barely slept the night before, his mind spinning between a sense of duty and fear. "Can I be a father?" he wondered, heavy-hearted. Dr. Helen had left after making sure the babies were stable, but her warning still echoed in James's mind. A single white man, raising 5 black baby girls in Willow Creek? People will talk. James knew she was right. This small, seemingly friendly town was no stranger to prejudice. He had overheard whispers at the grocery store, where Mrs. Smith complained about black kids causing trouble, and seen Mr. Johnson frown at interracial families at church. James wasn't the argumentative type, but he wasn't naive either. He knew that deciding to keep the babies would thrust him into the spotlight of critical stares. That morning, social worker Laura returned with a police officer, Sergeant Daniels, a middle-aged white man with a thick mustache. "Carter," Laura began, her voice flat, like she was reading from a script. "We've reported the incident. There are no cases of missing children matching the babies' descriptions. We'll be taking them to the shelter for further medical checks and to search for a suitable family." James felt his blood boil. "Suitable family," he repeated, his voice harder than he intended. "They're here, safe, and being cared for. What will the shelter do? Lock them in cold rooms?" Daniels crossed his arms, eyeing James carefully. "I understand your concern, Carter, but you have no experience raising children, let alone 5. You live alone. Your income's low. Do you think you can handle this?" James clenched his fists, trying to suppress his anger. He knew Daniels wasn't trying to be cruel, but the words cut deep into his insecurities. "I don't know if I'll do it well," James answered, his voice low but steady. "But I know I won't abandon them. No one's coming for them, right? Then I'll be their family, B." Laura jotted something down in her notebook, her eyes doubtful. "We'll need to begin legal proceedings. If you want to adopt, you'll have to prove you're capable, financially, emotionally, and in terms of your living conditions." James nodded, though his thoughts were tangled and chaotic. He had only a few $100s in his account, an old house, and a precarious job. But when he looked at the babies, one of whom had just woken up, her blue eyes seeming to plead, "Don't leave me," he knew he couldn't turn his back. James decided to name the babies, a symbolic gesture to declare they belonged to him. He sat by the sofa, thinking for a long while, then whispered, "Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma." Each name held meaning. Grace for elegance, Lily for purity, Faith for belief, Rose for beauty, and Emma for strength. As he softly spoke each name, his voice trembled, as if he were searching for faith in the very words. Helen, who had returned to check on them, smiled. Beautiful names, James. But you know this journey won't be easy, won't you? James sought out Rachel, a black pro bono attorney, as recommended by Helen. Rachel was a woman in her 30s, with neatly braided hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She worked for a legal aid organization, helping people who couldn't afford lawyers. Rachel listened to James's story in her small office, filled with papers and the scent of coffee. You want to adopt 5 newborns, undocumented, with no known relatives? And you're a single man? She asked, part astonished, part impressed. James nodded. I don't have much, but I have love. I want to give them a home. Rachel sighed and set her pen down. I'll help you, but you need to be ready. The legal system isn't easy, especially in Georgia. A white man adopting 5 black girls? That's going to spark controversy. They'll question your motives, inspect your finances, your home, even your past. Is there anything I should know about? James shook his head. I live. No debts, no criminal record. Just not much money. Rachel nodded. Then, we'll take it step by step. First, you need to apply for temporary guardianship. The following weeks were a whirlwind. James worked around the clock, taking delivery jobs to earn extra money for milk, diapers, and clothes. He repaired the house, patched holes in the walls, and repainted the windows, even though his hands ached and his eyes burned from exhaustion. Each night, he stayed up changing diapers, feeding the babies, and rocking them to sleep with lullabies his mother used to sing. Hush, baby, don't you cry, he crooned, his voice hoarse. Despite the fatigue, those moments made him feel truly alive. But Willow Creek wasn't letting James off easily. Word of the carpenter adopting 5 black babies spread like wildfire. At the grocery store, Mrs. Smith asked a customer, "Who does Carter think he is? A saint? Or just trying to get attention?" At church, Mr. Auer Johnson pulled James aside and said sternly, "Are you sure, James? Raising them will be hard. People will tell you're taking advantage." James pressed his lips together, holding back frustration. I don't care what people say. They're my daughters. Still, he couldn't deny the pain. He knew the gossip wasn't just about him. It was about the babies too. Innocent children judged solely for their skin color. One afternoon, as James pushed the stroller through the park, a group of white women stared at him, then turned away, whispering. One said loud enough for him to hear, "Probably orphans from Atlanta. Who knows where they came from?" James tightened his grip on the handle, but didn't respond. He leaned down to adjust Grace's blanket and whispered, "Don't worry, Daddy's here." He realized then that he wasn't just fighting a legal system. He was fighting an entire community's prejudice. Rachel helped James file for temporary guardianship. At the hearing, Judge Harris, a white man in his 60s, looked at James puzzled. "Mr. Carter, do you understand the responsibility of raising 5 children?" he asked. James stood tall, his voice shaky but clear. "Your Honor, I won't promise them a castle, but I promise them love and a home. That's all I have." The judge nodded but ordered a home inspection and financial report. James left the courthouse with faint hope, but a burning determination. As the babies slept that night, James sat at the kitchen table, staring at bills piled high and a nearly empty savings book. He thought of his mother, who once said, "Kindness is the one thing that never runs out." He clenched his fists and whispered, "I can do this for Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma." Choosing to adopt them wasn't just an act, but a vow that would change his life and the lives of the children fate had placed in his arms forever. The soft spring sunlight streamed through the windows of James Carter's wooden house in Willow Creek, Georgia, illuminating walls freshly painted by his hand. The cheerful laughter of 5 little girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, echoed through the rooms, blending with the aroma of toast and morning coffee. 4 years had passed since the day James found them in the pine forest. And now, at age 4, the girls had transformed his once cold home into a vibrant and loving sanctuary. Their jet-black skin shimmered in the light, and their bright blue eyes were still as radiant as that first day, as if they were carrying a story the world wasn't ready to hear within them. Now 44, his brown hair touched with more silver, James sat at the kitchen table tying Lily's ponytail. "Sit still, sweetheart," he said, his deep voice warm with a hint of teasing. Lily, the fiercest of the 5, scowled but remained still. Nearby, Grace was drawing a colorful picture. Faith softly hummed a folk song James had taught them. Rose focused intently on building with wooden blocks. And Emma, the most introspective, sat quietly in an armchair, watching with a knowing smile. James looked at his daughters, his heart swelling with a complex feeling, part joy, part worry. James's life now revolved around his 5 girls. The court had granted him full legal guardianship after a grueling year-long legal battle, thanks to the help of attorney Rachel and Dr. Helen. But the cost had been steep. James worked non-stop, mornings in the woodshop, afternoons making deliveries, and evenings doing repairs for neighbors. Every dollar went toward the girls, formula, clothes, books, and preschool tuition. Though still modest, the wooden house had been renovated to accommodate a large family. James built 5 little white beds with his hands and hung Grace's drawings on the walls. "Our home may not be fancy, but it's ours," he often said to the girls with a smile. Though poor, James ensured the girls lacked nothing in love and learning. Each evening, he read to them, from Charlotte's Web to fairy tales, and taught them how to grow vegetables in the backyard. He'd say that tomatoes need love as you do, his hands caked with soil. The girls grew up healthy, bright, and close-knit, like 5 fingers on the same hand. Grace was dreamy and loved storytelling. Lily was strong and protective. Faith was sensitive and quick to laugh or cry. Rose was curious and full of questions. And Emma, though quiet, seemed to understand everything far beyond her years. James was proud, but he also knew the world beyond their garden wasn't so kind. With its red dirt roads and whitewashed churches, Willow Creek remained outwardly peaceful, but prejudice crept in like moss beneath old stones. James and the girls became the subject of constant gossip. At the grocery store, Mrs. Smith now spoke openly to customers. "What's Carter raising those black kids for? Are you trying to be famous?" At the park, some white parents pulled their children away when the girls went down the slide. "They don't belong here," one mother whispered, loud enough for James to hear. He clenched his fists, but said nothing. Instead, he bent down, wiped the sweat from Faith's brow, and said, "Keep playing, sweetheart. Don't let anyone steal your joy." The judgment wasn't just aimed at the girls and James himself. Some called him the odd carpenter, questioning his motives. "He's probably getting paid to raise them," Mr. Johnson muttered at church, dripping with suspicion. The words cut deep. James didn't care about proving himself, but feared for the girls. Once, when dropping them off at preschool, a new teacher, Ms. Harper, looked at Grace and said, "Blue eyes? It must be contacted." James froze, anger flaring, but he held back. "My daughter's eyes are real, Ms. Harper," he said coldly. Later, he hugged Grace and whispered, "You're beautiful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Moments like these stirred deep conflict in James. He questioned whether he could truly shield his daughters from a world so quick to judge. When the girls were asleep at night, he sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of bills and an almost empty savings ledger. "Am I doing the right thing?" he asked himself. Once he considered moving to a larger city where prejudice might be less pronounced. But the thought of leaving Willow Creek, the town where he'd grown up, where his mother used to sing lullabies, made him hesitate. "This is our home," he murmured as if trying to convince himself. One afternoon, as James taught the girls how to fold paper airplanes, Lily ran over and clung to his leg. "Daddy, why did the lady at the store look at us like that?" she asked, her bright blue eyes filled with curiosity. James froze. He wanted to protect them from harsh truths, but he knew they'd soon begin to see it for themselves. He sat down and gathered all five close. "Listen to me," he said gently. "Some people will look at you differently, because of your skin, your blue eyes, or because I'm your daddy. But you are the most wonderful thing in the world. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Grace nodded. Faith hugged him tightly, and Emma watched. But her eyes said she understood even more than his words. James began to teach the girls about pride. He told them stories of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., emphasizing that skin color does not define worth. "You're stars," he said, pointing to the night sky. "Each of you shines in your way." The girls giggled, but James knew their journey was only beginning. He worried that prejudice would scar them, but he was determined to build a strong foundation where love always outweighed hate. One evening, as James repaired a broken chair, Helen stopped by. She watched the girls playing, then turned to him. "You're doing a good job, but you're tired, aren't you?" she asked. James smiled faintly. "Exhausted, but it's worth it. It's just, I'm afraid I'm not giving them enough." Helen placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've given them a home and love. That's more than what this world often gives." Her words were like a breeze of comfort, easing his doubt. But after Helen left, James found a small note in his mailbox. No name, just a folded piece of paper. Inside, a single handwritten line. "Those children don't belong here." James's heart pounded. He looked at the girls, laughing among their wooden toys. Who had written it? And why? He tucked the note into his pocket, determined to hide his fear. But deep down, he knew that the journey he and his daughters were on had reached a turning point where love would face even greater trials. Summer in Willow Creek, Georgia, arrived with heavy heat and the constant buzzing of cicadas in the old oak trees. In James Carter's wooden house, now filled with laughter and the pattering feet of five-year-old girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, the once quiet walls were now decorated with Grace's colorful drawings of butterflies and rainbows. James, his brown hair now heavily streaked with gray, sat in his armchair, watching the girls play in the backyard. Grace was spinning a story about a blue-eyed princess, while Lily led a game of tag. Faith clutched her doll. Rose dug in the dirt for treasure, and Emma sat quietly on the grass, observing with deep, thoughtful eyes. Over the past 4 years, James had turned the house into a real home. He worked constantly, from the woodshop to odd jobs around town, to support the girls. Though money was tight, he ensured they had new clothes, books, and weekend picnics by the river. He read stories or sang lullabies each night, his warm baritone filling the small room. But beneath the joy lingered a quiet worry. The anonymous letter he had received months ago, "Those children don't belong here," still haunted him. He had hidden it in a drawer, but every time he looked at the girls, he wondered, where did they come from, and who didn't want them here? One afternoon, while James was teaching the girls how to make paper kites, Rose, the most curious of the five, suddenly asked, "Daddy, why do I have blue eyes if you don't?" The question struck like a stone tossed into still water. James froze, his hands still holding the kite string. 4 other sets of bright blue eyes turned toward him, waiting. Grace tilted her head, Lily crossed her arms, Faith bit her lip, and Emma, as usual, just watched, her eyes seeming to know the answer already. James took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your blue eyes are a special gift," he said, "like stars in the sky. Not everyone has them, but they make you beautiful." Rose frowned, unconvinced. "But I heard Miss Harper at school say blue eyes aren't real. She said maybe they're lenses or something." James felt heat rise in his chest. Ms. Harper, the preschool teacher, had already once remarked on Grace's eyes that had angered him. He forced a smile and pulled Rose into his lap. "Ms. Harper doesn't understand. Your eyes are real, and I love them." But Rose's question stirred an unease James had long buried. The truth about the girl's origin. He knew they had been abandoned in the forest. But why? Who were their parents? And why had no one come looking? That night, once the girls were asleep, James opened an old wooden box where he had stored the clothes the girls had been wrapped in the day he found them. The fabric had faded, but one piece bore a strange embroidered symbol, a stylized L interwoven with a triangle. James had once thought it was just decoration, but now he wondered if it meant something more. He called Helen, the only person he trusted. "Helen, do you know of any clinics or hospitals with a logo like an L inside a triangle?" he asked. Helen was quiet for a moment. "It could be Langston Clinic in Atlanta. It shut down 6 years ago after some scandal." "Why do you ask?" James explained the symbol and Rose's question. Helen sighed. "James, are you sure you want to dig up the past? That could be dangerous. Kids get abandoned for a reason." But James couldn't stop. "I need to know, Helen. Not just for me, but for them. One day, they'll ask more. And I don't want to say, I don't know." Helen agreed to help, but warned him. "Be careful. Willow Creek doesn't like buried secrets rising to the surface." James began to investigate, though his resources were limited. He wrote to the Georgia Department of Health, requesting any records related to Langston Clinic. He called archives in Atlanta, but got only vague responses. "Those records are sealed," one clerk said. James didn't give up. He asked Rachel, the attorney who had helped him adopt the girls, to search for legal information. Rachel discovered that Langston Clinic had once been sued for non-transparent medical experimentation, but the details were buried. "There may be ties to a large biotech firm," she said, "but I'll need time." Meanwhile, prejudice in Willow Creek grew louder. One morning, as James dropped the girls off at preschool, a group of parents whispered at the gate, "Where did those kids come from? Who knows what issues they've got?" one muttered. James tightened his grip on Lily's hand and tried to ignore them. But Faith, sensitive and intuitive, lowered her head, eyes misty. After school, she hugged him and whispered, "Daddy, I don't want to go back. They don't like me." James's heart sank. He knelt, looking Faith in the eyes. "You're a fantastic girl, and I love you. Don't let their words hurt you. They don't understand you. But I do." James began teaching the girls how to confront prejudice. He told them about heroes like Harriet Tubman, who overcame unimaginable odds for freedom. "You're stronger than their words," he told them. "Hold your head high." The girls nodded, but James knew some wounds left scars. He questioned whether he was doing enough to protect them. One day, at the grocery store, Mrs. Smith glared at him. "Carter, you raised those kids well, sure, but do you think they'll fit in here? "This is Willow Creek," James answered coldly. "They're my daughters, Mrs. Smith. They belong here, just like I do." James's inner conflict deepened. He loved the girls more than anything, but feared he couldn't give them the life they deserved. His savings were gone, and bills piled high. One night, while repairing a broken table to sell, he looked at a photo of his mother on the wall. "Mom, am I doing the right thing?" he murmured. Visions of the girls laughing and playing filled his mind, silencing the doubt. But then he found another letter in the mailbox. This one written in red ink. "Stop digging, or there will be trouble." James's heart pounded. Someone knew he was investigating, and they didn't want him to continue. He hid the letter, but the fear grew. He watched the girls playing innocently in the yard. Grace painted a picture of a 5-star family. Lily taught Faith how to kick a soccer ball. Rose searched the soil for a gem, and Emma, as always, observed with haunting depth. James knew he couldn't stop. He needed the truth to answer Rose's question and shield the girls from whatever darkness was lurking. But he also knew that this journey would take them far more dangerous than he ever expected. Autumn returned to Willow Creek, Georgia, bringing calm winds and golden leaves falling along the red dirt road that led to James Carter's wooden house. Inside, the joyful laughter of 5 little girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, rang out like a melody, soothing the quiet worries deep in James's heart. Now 5 years old, the girls had become the center of his world. Grace loved painting colorful pictures. Lily led the outdoor games. Faith sang folk songs with a clear, sweet voice. Rose was constantly asking questions about everything. And Emma, the most introspective, often watched the world with her piercing blue eyes, as if she could see straight into people's souls. But beneath the joy of family life, an unease was growing. The second anonymous letter James had found in the mailbox weeks ago, written in red ink with the warning, "Stop searching if you don't want trouble," hung over him like a dark cloud. He had hidden the letter in a drawer alongside the first one, but every time he saw the girls playing innocently, a shadow of fear stirred inside him. Someone knew he was looking into the girls' origins, and they didn't want him to continue. Who would do this? He asked himself, clutching a now cold cup of coffee. He couldn't stop thinking about Rose's question. "Daddy, why do I have blue eyes if you don't?" That question had ignited a determination to find the truth, not just to answer the girls, but to protect them. He had contacted Helen and Rachel for help investigating the Langston Clinic in Atlanta, which had once been linked to non-transparent medical experiments. With her lawyer's persistence, Rachel uncovered an old document indicating that the clinic had been owned by a biotech company called Biogenics, led by billionaire Michael Langston. Langston had died 6 years ago, but his name seemed deeply tied to the mystery of the girls. James decided to dig deeper, even though he knew he was entering dangerous territory. He wrote letters to archival offices in Atlanta, requesting access to records from Langston Clinic. One staffer called back, voice cold and formal. "Those files have been sealed by court order. You have no access." James didn't give up. He asked Rachel to contact a local journalist, Sarah Bennett, known for her investigations into medical scandals. Sarah, a black woman in her 30s with short, curly hair and sharp eyes, agreed to help. "I've heard of Langston," she said over coffee in a small cafe in Willow Creek. Biogenics was accused of human trials, but there was never solid proof. If your girls are connected, something's very wrong. While James hunted for the truth, prejudice in Willow Creek grew more visible. The girls were now in preschool, and the stares from others became harder to ignore. One afternoon, when James came to pick them up, Ms. Harper pulled him aside. "Mr. Carter, I'll be frank," she said smugly. "Some parents are complaining about the presence of your girls. They say the kids are disruptive and, well, they don't fit in." James felt heat rise to his face. Disruptive? He repeated, voice hard. They're children, Ms. Harper. They play, they learn, just like everyone else. Harper shrugged. I'm just passing along what I've been told. On the walk home, Faith, the most sensitive, held James's hand, eyes brimming with tears. Daddy, why won't the kids play with me? She asked. James knelt and pulled her into his arms. Because they don't know how amazing you are yet, he said, though his heart ached. He looked back at Grace, Lily, Rose, and Emma, walking behind them, and wondered if he had placed his girls in too harsh a world. That night, he told them the story of Maya Angelou, who rose above prejudice to become a symbol of strength. You're powerful flowers, he told them. Even in the wind, you still bloom. The girls giggled, but James knew wounds from words could leave scars. Tension escalated when James found a third letter, which slid under his front door. It was short and chilling in black ink. Stop, Carter, for the children's sake. James felt a chill. He checked all the locks, ensuring the house was secure, and watched the girls sleep. Who's watching us? He whispered. He called Sarah and told her about the letter. She frowned. Someone doesn't want you to find out the truth. It could be someone who worked for Biogenics. I'll dig deeper, but be careful. Don't leave the kids alone. James started increasing security. He installed new locks and asked Ms. Clara, a kind black widow who lived next door, to keep an eye on the house when he was away. He taught the girls how to identify strangers, though he hated to frighten them. If anyone watches you too long, run straight to me, okay? He said, his tone gentle but serious. Lily nodded bravely, but Faith clutched his hand tighter. James felt helpless, but he couldn't stop now. The truth about the girls wasn't just an answer to Rose's question. It was the key to shielding them from unseen threats. One evening, as James examined the cloth with the L symbol again, Sarah called. James, I found a former Langston Clinic employee, she said quickly. Her name's Martha. She lives in Savannah. She agreed to meet, but only you. She's scared. James agreed, though his chest tightened with nerves. He asked Helen to watch the girls over the weekend and drove his old pickup to Savannah. Martha, a white woman in her 60s, met him in a small diner. Her eyes were wary, and her hands shook as she held her tea. Langston Clinic wasn't just a birthing center, she whispered. They were experimenting on newborns. I don't know the full details, but there was a secret project focused on black infants. I left when things started to feel wrong. James's heart pounded. My girls, are they part of it? He asked. Martha looked out the window, her voice trembling. I'm not sure, but that L symbol, that's Biogenics. They selected children with unique traits. Someone may still be watching if your daughters were part of that program. She refused to say more and hurried out of the diner. James sat there, his mind spinning. Could his girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, result from an experiment? The thought filled him with rage and dread. Back in Willow Creek, James hugged the girls tighter than ever. He looked into their bright blue eyes and told himself, no matter where you come from, you are my daughters. But the third letter and Martha's warning were clear signs. The secret surrounding the girls was pulling him into a dangerous labyrinth. He knew he had to keep going, but he also understood that the price of truth might be higher than he had imagined. As the girls slept soundly that night, James stood by the window, looking into the dark pine woods. A strange car crept by slowly, headlights flashing across the front porch. James clenched his fists, His and the girl's journey had entered a new chapter, where love must stand against the shadows. Winter settled over Willow Creek, Georgia, covering the town in a thin mist that blurred the red dirt roads and tin-roofed houses. Light flashed from the fireplace inside James Carter's wooden home, casting warm shadows on the walls where Grace's colorful drawings now hung. His 5 daughters, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, now 5.5 years old, played in the living room, their bright laughter echoing through the house like a balm on James's weary heart. But beneath the joy of family, a growing dread lingered. The anonymous letters, first warning, "Those children don't belong here," then, "Stop searching or face trouble," and the third, "Stop, Carter, for the children's sake." It had left James sleepless. The threats hung over him like a sword suspended by a thread. Now 44, James sat at the kitchen table, holding the faded cloth with the mysterious L symbol. The recent meeting with Martha in Savannah still haunted him. Her words about the Langston Clinic and Biogenics' experiments on black infants made his skin crawl. She had said that if they're part of the project, someone is still watching. James knew he was brushing against something dangerous, but couldn't stop. The girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, deserved the truth about their origins, and he had to protect them, no matter the cost. Amid the fear, James began to notice something different. One morning, during a family walk by the river, Grace pointed to the sky and said, "Daddy, it's going to storm tonight. The clouds feel sad." James chuckled, assuming it was a child's imagination. But a violent storm rolled in that night, with thunder shaking the windows. James was stunned. "How did you know?" he asked. Grace shrugged, her blue eyes shimmering. "I just felt it." A few days later, Lily, his boldest daughter, completed a 100-piece puzzle in under 10 minutes, even though she'd never seen it before. She said that was easy, and Daddy liked it as if it was no big deal. Faith, the most sensitive, also surprised him. When their kind neighbor, Mrs. Clara, fell ill, Faith took her hand and looked into her eyes. "You'll be okay," she said, with calm certainty. James thought it was a child's comfort, but by the next day, Clara had recovered, as if touched by something unseen. Rose, ever curious, began reading faster than any child her age. She devoured a 50-page picture book in one afternoon, whispering, "I like how the words tell stories." And Emma, the quietest and most profound, seemed able to sense emotions. When James was worried, she silently placed her small hand over his and whispered, "Don't be afraid, Daddy. Everything will be all right." These abilities filled James with awe and fear. He was not superstitious, but he could not deny that the girls were different. Their piercing blue eyes, exceptional intellect, and uncanny intuition exceeded what he knew to be possible in children their age. He wondered if they were linked to the biogenics project Martha had spoken of. The idea that they might be the products of an experiment made him furious, but also afraid. If someone out there knew what the girls were capable of, would they ever be safe? Meanwhile, the prejudice in Willow Creek grew heavier. Ms. Harper continued her cold treatment at the preschool, often excluding the girls from group activities to avoid disruption. Some parents openly requested that the school reconsider allowing the girls in the same class as their children. One mother said, "They're just too different," during a parent meeting, glancing sideways at James. He sat in the back, fists clenched, but said nothing. Instead, he took the girls home and organized a joy day with cookies and games. He told them, "Your daddy's exceptional team," hiding the pain behind a smile. But the girls weren't so easily fooled. One evening, As James read their bedtime story, Faith asked, "Daddy, why doesn't Miss Harper like me? Is it because I'm black?" The question pierced him like a blade. James took a deep breath and pulled Faith into his arms. "It's not because of you. It's because she doesn't understand," he said. "Your skin is part of you. It makes you beautiful. Never doubt that." He told them about Rosa Parks, explaining that being different was a strength. The girls nodded, but Faith's eyes remained heavy with sadness. James hugged them all, vowing to be stronger for them. But social pressure was only part of it. One morning, James opened the mailbox and found a fourth letter, typed, not handwritten. A single line read, "The children belong to us. Stop now or pay the price." His heart pounded. He scanned the street. No one. He called Sarah, the journalist who was helping him. "Sarah, they know I haven't stopped," he said, voice trembling. Sarah was silent for a moment. "James, I found an internal biogenics document. It references a project called Luminous, targeting black children with unique genetic markers. Your daughters might be part of it. I'm trying to reach another source, but you must be careful." James intensified security. He installed small cameras around the house, asked Mrs. Clara to watch the girls when he worked, and avoided taking them to crowded places. He taught them how to call Helen if anything strange happened. "Just in case," he said, trying to keep his tone cheerful. But Lily, always perceptive, looked him in the eyes and asked, "Daddy, is someone trying to take us away?" James froze. He knelt and hugged her tightly. "No one will take you. I'm right here. Always." But inside, he knew the threat was getting closer. While James was fixing his truck one afternoon, Emma came to him and took his hand. "Daddy, I had a dream," she said softly. "There was a black woman. She said I had her eyes." James's breath caught. "A dream?" he asked, trying to stay calm. Emma nodded. She looked sad, but she told me I had to be strong. James held her tightly, his mind spinning. Was it just a dream, or something more? He looked at the other girls playing in the yard and whispered, "No matter what, I'll protect you." But as night fell, headlights from another unfamiliar car slowly swept across the front of the house, lingering a moment too long. James stood at the window, fists clenched. Their journey had entered a dangerous turning point, where love would be tested against shadows still unnamed. Spring 2025 cast a fresh green hue over Willow Creek, Georgia, but a storm was brewing within James Carter's heart. His wooden house, once filled with the comforting laughter of 5 little girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, now pulsed with tension. The girls, now 6 years old, still played with joy, their drawings bright and full of wonder. But James could no longer hide his fear. The anonymous letters from those children don't belong here. They belong to us. Stop or pay the price had turned his life into a maze of threats. The girls' special abilities, Grace predicting the weather, Emma sensing emotions, only deepened his dread that someone was watching, waiting. A sleek black car pulled up outside while James was brewing coffee one morning. A man in a tailored suit, hair neatly parted, stepped out holding a leather briefcase. "Mr. James Carter?" he asked, voice cold. James nodded, heart pounding. The man handed him a sealed envelope bearing the logo of a prestigious New York law firm, Harrington and Associates. "This is a summons," the man said. "You are required to appear in court regarding the custody of 5 minors." James opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a document stating that a wealthy couple, Robert and Laura Hensley, claimed the girls as legal heirs to a massive estate left by Michael Langston, the late billionaire behind biogenics. On one condition, guardianship had to be transferred to the Hensleys. James's blood boiled. "Not a chance," he muttered, gripping the letter. He immediately called Rachel, the lawyer who had helped him adopt the girls. In her modest Willow Creek office, Rachel read the papers and frowned. "This is serious, James. The Hensleys have money, influence, and a top-tier legal team. They claim you're unfit, and the $500 million inheritance is only accessible if the girls live with them." James clenched his fists. "Money? I don't care about money. They're my daughters." Rachel put a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but we'll have to fight. They'll attack your finances, your home, your past. Are you ready?" James wasn't sure if he was, but he knew he couldn't give up. He looked at the girls playing in the yard and told himself, "They're my family." But fear crept in. Who were the Hensleys? Why did they want the girls? And how did they know about Langston's fortune? He recalled Martha's words. Someone is still watching. Could the Hensleys be tied to biogenics and the secret luminous project Sarah, the journalist, was investigating? As they prepared for court, tensions in Willow Creek intensified. News of the case spread quickly, dividing the town. Some, like neighbor Miss Clara, offered support. "You're a good father, James. Don't let them take your girls," she said, delivering cookies. But others whispered behind his back. At the grocery store, Mrs. Smith told a customer, "Carter's raising those kids for money. Figures it's coming out now." At church, Mr. Johnson pulled James aside. "Don't you think they'd be better off with a wealthy family? They could give them everything." James responded coldly, "They have me. That's enough." The girls, though still young, sensed the tension. One night, as James read bedtime stories, Lily asked Daddy if someone was trying to take us far away. James froze. He pulled all 5 girls close. He said firmly that no one was taking you, though his heart was in turmoil. But Faith, ever sensitive, held his hand, eyes glistening. "Daddy, I can feel your worry. I don't want you to be sad." James embraced her tightly, reminding himself to stay strong. He told them about Nelson Mandela and fighting for justice so they would know that love could withstand any storm. The trial was held in a cold courtroom with polished wooden benches in Atlanta. The Hensleys, both in their 40s, arrived looking perfect. Robert in a fine suit, Laura glittering with jewelry. They looked at James with disdain as if he were unworthy. Their lawyer, Mr. Harrington, argued that James, with his low income and substandard home, could not provide the girls with the life they deserved. "They are the heirs of Michael Langston," he said. "They deserve elite education, luxury, and security." James, wearing an old suit borrowed from Rachel, felt small, but he didn't bow his head. Rachel countered fiercely, highlighting James's devotion and sacrifice. She said Mr. Carter may not have millions, but he's given these children a home, education, and unconditional love. The judge, Mrs. Coleman, a black woman with sharp eyes, listened intently, revealing no emotion. Then James was called to the stand. He took a deep breath and faced the judge. "I don't promise castles," he said, voice shaking but sincere, "but I promise them love, safety, and family. That's what they need, not wealth." The courtroom fell silent, but Laura Hensley's cold gaze lingered as if she knew something James didn't. Back in Willow Creek, James returned home heavy-hearted. As he stepped inside, the doorbell rang. Standing there was a black woman in her early 40s, hair neatly tied back, eyes full of sadness and resolve. "Mr. James Carter?" she asked. "I'm Aisha Thompson. I might be the girl's mother." James was stunned. He invited her in cautiously. Aisha sat in the armchair, glancing around at Grace's drawings. I used to work for Biogenics, she said softly. Your girls were part of the Luminous Project. I never wanted them abandoned, but I was forced. I escaped. Now, I want to protect them. James's hands clenched. Did you leave them in the forest? He asked, voice sharp. Aisha shook her head, eyes misting. No, I didn't abandon them. I was stripped of my rights and they were taken. I found you because the Hensleys are not what they seem. They want the girls for what they can do. James was speechless. Their abilities? Aisha nodded. Project Luminous aimed to create children with enhanced intelligence and intuition. Your girls are the result. But they were dismissed because of their skin color. Rage and fear surged through James. They're my children, not experiments. Aisha's gaze softened. I know. That's why I'm here. We have to protect them. Together. After she left, James stood at the window, watching the girls play. Grace was drawing a picture of the woman from her dream, an image resembling Aisha. James knew the legal battle was beginning. The Hensleys, Biogenics, and the secrets surrounding the girls had pulled him into a dangerous game. But when Emma took his hand and whispered, Daddy, I know you'll win, he felt something new, strength. Their journey was no longer just about protecting a family, confronting a dark past to create a light-filled future. The summer of 2025 in Willow Creek, Georgia, brought sweltering heat and dry winds sweeping the cotton fields. Inside James Carter's wooden cabin, the laughter of 5 little girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, still echoed. But it no longer sounded carefree. The girls, now 6 years old, seemed to sense the tension in the air, despite James's efforts to hide it. The legal battle with the Hensleys, a wealthy couple seeking custody of the girls to claim Michael Langston's $500 million inheritance, had thrown the family into a dangerous spiral. The appearance of Aisha Thompson, who claimed to be the girl's biological mother, forced James to a crossroads. Her story about Biogenics' Luminous Project, a genetic experiment designed to create children with superior intelligence, cast a dark shadow over his heart. James sat at the kitchen table, the dim yellow light casting tired shadows across his face. In front of him sat a cup of cold coffee and a worn cloth with the symbol L, the only clue about the girl's origins. Aisha sat across from him with her curly hair tied back and her eyes resolute. I'm not here to disrupt your life, she said in a low voice. But the girls are in danger. The Hensleys don't just want the money. They know about the girls' abilities, their intelligence, intuition, sensitivity. Biogenics never abandoned the Luminous Project. James clenched his fists, struggling to contain his anger. They are my daughters, not experiments. What do you know about this project? Aisha took a deep breath, her eyes clouded with pain. She explained that 10 years ago, she had been a young geneticist working for Biogenics under Michael Langston's leadership. The Luminous Project aimed to create children with exceptional intellectual and emotional capabilities using gene editing technology. She had been assigned to oversee the artificial pregnancies, but was shocked when Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma were labeled failures because their black skin and blue eyes didn't match the investors' aesthetic standards. I wanted to protect them, Aisha said, her voice trembling. But I was threatened and stripped of my rights. They were taken from me, and I thought they were gone. When I found out you adopted them, I had to come. James looked at Aisha, torn between empathy and suspicion. Why didn't you come sooner? He asked. Aisha bowed her head. I was being hunted, James. Biogenics covered everything up. I hid overseas, gathering evidence. I returned because the Hensleys worked for the people who funded the project. They want to exploit the girls' abilities. A chill ran through James. He recalled the anonymous letters, the headlights of a strange car sweeping past the house, and Emma's dream about a black woman. "Do you have proof?" he asked. Aisha nodded, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. "This is internal documentation from Biogenics. I gave a copy to Sarah, a journalist. But you need to be careful. They won't stop." As James and Aisha made plans, tensions in Willow Creek intensified. The lawsuit drew attention from local media, and the town was more divided than ever. Some supported James, like Mrs. Clara, who organized fundraisers to help with legal fees, but many others turned their backs. At the grocery store, Mrs. Smith roared to a customer, saying that Carter had dragged those kids into trouble. If they belonged to rich folks, why not let them go? Miss Harper grew increasingly harsh at preschool, punishing the girls for minor mistakes. Once, when Lily protested being removed from a group, Miss Harper said, "You should know your place." When James learned of it, he confronted her. "Don't you ever speak to my daughter like that," he said, his voice cold but sharp. Harper shrugged, but her eyes brimmed with malice. Despite their young age, the girls felt the pressure. One evening, as James was repairing a broken chair, Grace approached him, holding a newly drawn picture of a family of 5 stars beneath a sky full of dark clouds. "Daddy, I'm afraid the clouds will hide the stars," she said. James hugged Grace, his heart aching. He told her about Harriet Tubman, a guide through the darkness. He said, "You are the light, and I won't let the clouds cover you." But Faith, the most sensitive of them, took his hand and whispered, "Daddy, I saw someone outside last night." James froze. He checked the security cameras, and a shadowy figure had passed by at midnight. He called the police, but Sergeant Daniels said, "Probably just some kids messing around." James decided to work with Aisha and Sarah to gather evidence against the Hensleys. Sarah discovered that Robert Hensley had once been a shareholder in Biogenics, and Laura Hensley had ties to scientists involved in the Luminous project. Sarah said they don't want the girls out of love during a cafe meeting. They want to study them and exploit their intelligence and intuition. James felt a wave of rage and fear. He turned to Aisha. "What will you do to protect them?" Aisha replied, "I'll testify in court, but you must keep them safe. They're going to hit harder." The next hearing in Atlanta was a brutal battle. The Hensleys brought in experts, arguing that James lacked the finances and provided an unfit environment for the girls. Rachel countered, emphasizing the love and stability James offered. Dressed in a borrowed suit, James stood before Judge Coleman. He said, "I don't have millions of dollars, trembling but sincere. But I have a heart and never give up on my daughters." Sitting in the back row, the girls watched him with sparkling blue eyes. Emma, usually quiet, held Lily's hand as if to say, "Daddy will win." But the Hensleys didn't stop. One night, as James was driving the girls home from the library, a black car followed them. He accelerated, heart pounding, and only stopped when they reached Mrs. Clara's house. "Stay here with Mrs. Clara. Daddy will be right back," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. When he checked his car, he found a small device attached underneath, a tracker. James called Sarah, who confirmed that Biogenics has money to hire surveillance. "You need to move the girls somewhere safe." But James shook his head. "This is our home. I won't run." That night, Aisha came to James's house with a crucial document, a contract between Biogenics and the Hensleys, proving they intended to use the girls for research. She said we might win if we could bring this to court. James looked at her, his gaze softening. "What have you done to atone?" he asked. Aisha bowed her head. "I can't change the past, but I'll do everything to protect them." "You're not alone, James." For the first time, James felt a glimmer of hope. But as he looked at the girls sleeping soundly, he knew the battle wasn't over. Another letter appeared, this time taped to the door, with the words, "Time is running out, Carter." James clenched his fists. The journey to protect the girls had become a race against time, and he would let no one take his family away. Autumn 2025, in Willow Creek, Georgia, arrived with chilly winds and the vibrant golden hues of oak leaves. Inside James Carter's wooden cabin, the laughter of 5 little girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, still lit up the darkness, yet the tension from the legal battle with the Hensleys made the atmosphere heavy. The girls, now 6 years old, with sparkling blue eyes and exceptional intellect, seemed to sense the invisible threat. James, his brown hair now almost entirely gray, sat at the kitchen table, tightly gripping the document that Aisha Thompson, the girl's biological mother, had given him. That document, a contract between Biogenics and the Hensleys, was proof that the wealthy couple wanted to exploit the girl's special abilities for research, not out of love. The latest anonymous letter, taped to the door with the words, "Time is running out, Carter," felt like a final warning. James and Aisha, once skeptical of each other, had now become allies. Aisha, her eyes resolute yet full of sorrow, had shared the full story of Biogenics' Luminous project, a genetic experiment designed to create children with superior intellect and intuition, only to be abandoned because their black skin didn't meet investors' aesthetic standards. Aisha said I tried to protect them during a visit to James's home, her voice trembling. But Biogenics stripped me of my rights. I hid to gather evidence, and now I'm here to make amends. James looked at her, his anger now replaced with empathy. "We'll protect the girls together," he said firmly. The final hearing in Atlanta was a fierce battle. The courtroom was packed, with journalists and residents of Willow Creek filling every seat. The Hensleys, polished in appearance and backed by an expensive legal team, continued to argue that James was unfit to raise 5 girls. Attorney Harrington said that Mr. Carter lives in an old wooden cabin, has a low income, and cannot provide a future worthy of these children. Rachel, James's lawyer, fiercely countered. She presented the document from Aisha, proving that the Hensleys intended to use the girls for profit-driven research connected to the illegal Luminous project. The journalist Sarah also submitted an investigative article exposing Biogenics' shady activities. In a borrowed suit with worn-out shoulders, James stood before Judge Coleman. The girls sat in the back row, their blue eyes fixed on him with unwavering trust. "Your Honor," James began, his voice shaking but sincere. "I don't have millions of dollars, no mansion, no elite school. But I have loved and spent the last 6 years giving my daughters a home, a family. They are not assets, not experiments. They are my children, and I will not let anyone take them away." The courtroom fell silent. Grace sketched a small drawing while she waited. Lily held Faith's hand. Rose whispered something to Emma, and Emma smiled, as if she already knew what was coming. Aisha was called to the witness stand. She spoke about the Luminous project with calm yet emotional clarity. "I am the girls' biological mother, but I had no right to keep them. Biogenics wanted to exploit their intellect, and the Hensleys were part of that plan. James Carter gave them the love I couldn't. I asked the court to let them stay with him." Judge Coleman, her expression stern yet fair, took careful notes. When the Hensleys attempted to counter, a local reporter raised a hand, revealing that Sarah's article had stirred outrage among the public toward Biogenics. After 3 tense days, Judge Coleman delivered her verdict. "Based on the evidence and testimonies," she said, her voice clear and firm, "this court grants permanent custody to Mr. James Carter. The Hensleys will be investigated for involvement in Biogenics' illegal activities. The children are heirs to Michael Langston's estate, and Mr. Carter will manage these assets until they reach adulthood. The courtroom erupted in applause. James knelt and hugged the girls, tears streaming down his face. Grace whispered, "You won, Daddy." Emma held his hand, her eyes saying, "I knew you would." News of the victory spread quickly. Willow Creek, once divided, began to change. Mrs. Clara hosted a small celebration at the church, inviting the whole town. Some, like Mr. Johnson, came to apologize to James. "I was wrong, Carter. You're a good father," he said awkwardly. But not everyone changed. Mrs. Smith muttered at the store, saying the money would ruin them. James didn't care. He used part of the inheritance to repair the preschool, build a community library, and support poor children in town. He told Aisha, "I want my daughters to grow up knowing money isn't everything." Aisha stayed in Willow Creek, working with James to ensure the girls' safety. She taught them about Black culture, telling stories of ancestors and the power of resilience. "You are gifts," she said, her eyes shining as she watched Grace draw, Lily play soccer, Faith sing, Rose read, and Emma quietly reflect. James sensed the bond growing between Aisha and the girls, but he also felt uneasy. One night, checking the security cameras, he spotted a stranger near the house. He called Sarah, who warned that Biogenics may have lost in court, but they haven't given up. Keep the girls close. James and Aisha decided to move the girls to a new home on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Still simple but safer. He taught the girls to face danger, always emphasizing that Aisha and I would protect them. While James read to them one evening, Emma said, "Daddy, I dreamed of a big door. There's something substantial behind it." James froze, recalling Aisha's words about a Biogenics archive that might contain the final secrets of the Luminous Project. He looked at Aisha, and she nodded. "We have to find it, James," she said, not just to protect the girls, but to end Biogenics' darkness. James stood by the window as the girls slept soundly, gazing at the starry sky. The last letter still haunted him, but the court victory had given him new strength. He knew the journey wasn't over. The Hensleys, Biogenics, and those lurking in the shadows were still out there. But with Aisha by his side, and his love for the girls, James was ready to face any challenge. He whispered, "No one will tear this family apart." Grace painted a bright star in the backyard on her canvas, as if foreseeing a future full of hope. Winter of 2025 blanketed Willow Creek, Georgia, with a thin layer of snow, turning the red dirt roads into shimmering white ribbons. In their new home on the outskirts, James Carter stood by the window, watching the girls, Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, play outside, building snowmen with clear, joyful laughter. Now 6.5 years old, they had grown more mature, their blue eyes still shining like stars. The legal victory over the Hensleys had brought temporary peace, but James knew the threat from Biogenics and the Luminous Project was far from over. Aisha Thompson, the girls' biological mother, was now an indispensable part of their lives, standing alongside James to protect the children from the shadows of the past. James, his hair white and face weathered, felt his heart lighten after the court's ruling. The $500 million inheritance from Michael Langston was under his management, but he did not touch it for himself. Instead, he used part of it to build a community library, renovate the preschool, and support underprivileged children in Willow Creek. "Money doesn't make a family," he told Aisha one evening as they sat by the fire watching the girls draw. Aisha nodded, her eyes gentle but determined. She said we must use it to protect them and help other children. Aisha's presence had transformed the family. She taught the girls about Black cultural heritage, telling stories of figures like Sojourner Truth and the power of resilience. Dreamy Grace began painting pictures of strong women inspired by Aisha. Strong-willed Lily learned to play drums from a black musician Aisha invited over. Sensitive Faith composed a song about the House of Love. Curious Rose asked Aisha hundreds of questions about their ancestors. At the same time, Emma, more thoughtful than her age, often sat beside Aisha, listening as if she understood every pain her mother carried. The girl's special abilities became more apparent. Grace predicted a snowstorm before the weather forecast announced it. Lily solved third-grade math problems despite only being in kindergarten. Faith comforted a crying child in the park with just a hug. Rose read a children's science book and explained the solar system, astonishing James. With a strange intuition, Emma seemed to sense danger before it happened. Once, she tugged James's hand and said, "Daddy, don't take the main road today." James obeyed and later learned that a traffic accident had occurred there. He began to believe the girls were not just special, but carried a greater mission. With Sarah's help, James and Aisha started crafting a bigger plan. Documents from Aisha revealed the Luminous Project had created not just these 5 girls, but might be linked to other children abandoned or hidden in various places. Biogenics experimented on dozens of children, Aisha said bitterly. Some were adopted out, but others might still be exploited. We have to find them. James nodded, though the thought sent chills down his spine. He did not want his daughters dragged into danger, but he knew he could not turn his back on other innocent children. They established the Ray of Hope Fund, using part of the Langston inheritance to support disadvantaged children and investigate biogenics' illegal projects. Sarah published a shocking article exposing details of Luminous, drawing public attention. The Willow Creek community, once divided by prejudice, began to change. Mrs. Clara organized gatherings at the church, inviting James and the girls to share their stories. Mr. Johnson, who had once doubted James, now openly supported him, telling others that Carter taught me that family doesn't have to look alike to love each other. Even Miss Harper, the formerly strict teacher, started treating the girls better, though still cautiously. But the threat hadn't vanished. One morning, James received an anonymous call when he took the girls to the community library. "Carter, you won the court, but not us," a cold voice said. "The children belong to us." James quickly took the girls home, checked security cameras, and found a black car parked nearby the night before. He called Aisha and Sarah. "They haven't given up," Sarah said. "I have sources saying Biogenics is trying to hide an archive in Atlanta containing info on other children. We must find it before they do." James and Aisha decided to act. They asked Mrs. Clara to watch the girls and drove to Atlanta, where an old abandoned Biogenics warehouse stood. Guided by Sarah, they discovered a safe hidden beneath the floor, locked with a code. Aisha opened it, using her biogenics knowledge. Inside was a list of children, their names, birth dates, and locations, with notes on special abilities. James was stunned to see the names of Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma on the list. It marked a successful experiment, but was canceled for not meeting aesthetic standards. Aisha grasped James's hand, eyes wet. "We have to save the other children," she said. Back in Willow Creek, James and Aisha shared the plan with the girls at a level they could understand. James said other areas needed help. Grace drew a picture of lost stars. Lily declared, "I will protect them." Faith sang a song of hope. Rose asked, "Where will we find them?" And Emma, with deep eyes, said, "I know they're waiting." James hugged the girls, feeling the power of their love. He looked at Aisha, and they both knew that this mission was not just about protecting their family, but bringing light to the children forgotten by the world. But as night fell, A black car appeared again, its headlights sweeping across the house. James stood by the window, fists clenched. He knew Biogenics wouldn't give up easily. Aisha placed a hand on his shoulder. "We are stronger than them, James. Because we have love." James nodded, but his heart was heavy. A new letter left on the doorstep bore just one line. "The archive is only the beginning. Be careful, Carter." Their journey had become a race against time, to protect the girls and all the children waiting in the shadows. Spring of 2035, in Willow Creek, Georgia, carried the scent of wildflowers and the vibrant green of blooming cotton fields. James Carter's old wooden house had been replaced by a spacious yet simple home, nestled within a garden of flowers planted by the girls. Grace, Lily, Faith, Rose, and Emma, now 16 years old, were no longer the trembling little girls in the pine forest years ago. They had grown into strong, intelligent young women, their blue eyes shining brightly like guiding stars. James, now 54, with white hair but a warm smile, stood on the porch watching his children chatter excitedly about new projects. Aisha Thompson, their biological mother, now an inseparable part of the family, sat beside James, her eyes full of pride. The past 10 years had taken James and the girls far beyond what he had imagined. The 2025 legal victory over the Hensleys was a turning point. Still, the greater mission began when James and Aisha founded the Ray of Hope Fund. Using the $500 million inheritance from Michael Langston, they built schools, hospitals, and support centers for disadvantaged children across the United States. But what drew global attention was their effort to find and protect other children from Biogenics' luminous project. The archive discovered in Atlanta revealed dozens of children abandoned or exploited, and James, Aisha, and the girls tirelessly worked to bring them to loving families. The girls, with their special abilities, had become a global inspiration. Grace, the dreamer, was now a poet and artist, and her works about love and unity were displayed in museums. Strong and determined, Lily became an engineer developing technology to assist disabled children. Sensitive and musical Faith became a psychologist helping traumatized children regain trust. Curious Rose became a journalist writing investigative reports on children's rights. Deep and intuitive, Emma became a scientist researching how intellect and emotion could change the world. Together, they led the initiatives of the Ray of Hope Fund, bringing light to dark places. Willow Creek, once full of prejudice, had transformed. The community library, built by James, became a cultural center where white, black, and children of all ethnicities studied and played together. Mrs. Clara, now over 70, still told the story of the carpenter and the 5 stars to children. Mr. Johnson, once a skeptic, proudly brought his grandchildren to the girls' workshops. Even Mrs. Smith, who had whispered behind backs, donated to the fund. Miss Harper, the once strict teacher, had retired, but sent a letter apologizing to James, admitting her mistakes. James bore no grudges. "People can change," he told Aisha, "if we give them a chance." But the journey had not been easy. Biogenics, though under investigation, left behind remnants. James and Aisha faced lawsuits, threats, and mysterious figures watching them. Once, when Emma was 12, her sharp intuition helped her discover a listening device in the house. James reported it to the police, leading to the arrest of a former Biogenics employee. The anonymous letters gradually ceased, but James remained vigilant. He taught the girls how to protect themselves without living in fear. "You are light," he said, "and light fears no darkness." Aisha, with her scientific knowledge and love for the girls, became a mentor not only to them, but also to James. Though unmarried, She and James built a relationship founded on respect and shared purpose. Aisha said, "We are family," as they sat by the fireplace, watching the girls discuss plans to aid refugee children. James nodded, feeling the strength of their unity. He was no longer the lone carpenter of Willow Creek, but a father, a guide, and a warrior for justice. One evening, as the family gathered to celebrate the 10th anniversary of their legal victory, Emma stood up, holding a small notebook. "I want to tell a story," she said in a warm, deep voice. She recounted her dream of a black woman, Aisha, and a great door at age 6. "That door is the world," Emma said, eyes sparkling. "And we opened it, not just for us, but for every forgotten child." Grace recited a poem about the stars that never go out. Lily presented plans to build schools in Africa. Faith sang a song of hope, and Rose shared a new article on children's rights. James and Aisha looked at each other, tears silently falling. That night, the family lay on the grass in the yard, gazing at the sky. A strange bright star appeared, as if newly lit. Grace said, "That is the star of those who dare to love dreamily." James held Aisha's hand, feeling her warmth. "And those who never give up," he whispered. Emma, lying beside him, said, "Daddy, I think we didn't just save other children. We saved the whole world." James smiled, knowing she was right. Their love, his, Aisha's, and the girls', had created an eternal legacy, not measured by money, but compassion. Willow Creek was now a symbol of change. The girls, through the Ray of Hope Fund, had inspired millions. Schools named after them had risen from Atlanta to Nairobi. Grace's poems, Lily's technology, Faith's therapies, Rose's writings, and Emma's research touched hearts worldwide. James, now a speaker at children's rights conferences, always said, "I didn't save my children. They saved me, and they saved all of us." James stood by the window as the girls slept peacefully, gazing at the new star in the sky. He remembered his mother, who once said, "Kindness never runs dry." He knew he had lived true to her words. Aisha approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We did it, James," she said. James nodded, hope overflowing. Their journey, from a cold forest to global light, proved that love can change the world, one star at a time.